there's another microphone right here too.
Yeah, but
That's
they're
fine.
gonna be sitting over there.
Oh, okay.
Sitting right over here.
How you doing, man? Good to see you. Good to see you.
Very nice to see you.
Blessing to see you.
Yeah.
What a blessing indeed.
I think the
Salute
mic is
you.
on.
Salute you.
Good morning. Do better than that. Me. Test. Testing. Let's see if this is better. Okay. Good morning, everyone. It's really, really terrific just seeing so many of you who are here for this incredible presentation this morning. And I know that there are several hundred, indeed, perhaps a few thousand individuals who will be watching this via live stream. I'm David Wilson, President, Morgan State University. And I really want to welcome you to the Presidential Distinguished Speaker Series. This series was inaugurated a few years ago, and it is designed to bring some of the nation's leading and most provocative thought leaders from various disciplines and various professional fields of study here to our national treasure, Morgan State University. We strongly believe here at Morgan that exposing our university community to a broad range of views, to a broad range of perspectives and angles on a myriad of opportunities and challenges that we face as a nation today is in keeping with Morgan's mission of serving as this premier public urban research university that is rooted in the great HBCU tradition. This series is designed to promote mind expansion, if you will, to enable you to wrestle with the issues of the past, to wrestle with the challenges that we currently face, and to think about the possibilities of tomorrow. And so this morning, we turn our attention to hear from an expert on race, an expert on campus climates and student success in higher ed, and your role, our role, as emerging intellectuals. Many of you know that in this series, we seek out individuals who are on the cutting edge of thought, the cutting edge of innovation. Individuals who oftentimes can have the ability to see around corners, and individuals who are able to imagine a nation, imagine an America that is inclusive, an America that is equitable, an America that is just, and an America that is fair to everyone. And so in doing so, we are showing our students, hopefully, what we really mean here at Morgan when we say that we are growing the future and leading the world. We're growing you to make sure that you are imbued with perspectives, that you understand facts, that you understand the endless search for truth, that you are not confused about science. We value the free expression of ideas and thoughts, and we remain open to diverse seekers. And so as president, I certainly understand the importance of having multifaceted points of view, for such views often lead to greatness in thought and to greatness of possibilities. And so you came to hear Professor Cornel West, and that's enough for me. And I'm going to introduce an amazing student here at Morgan, Mr. Alexander Cimanet, who is a member of the President's Leadership Circle. And Alexander is going to officially introduce Brother Dr. Cornel West to us. Alexander.
morning, Morgan State. My name is Alexander Cimanet, and I'm a member of the President's Leadership Circle. Cornel West, PhD, is the Dietrich Bonhoeffer Chair at Union Theological Seminary. Dr. West teaches on the works of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, as well as courses in philosophy of religion, African American critical thought, and a wide range of subjects, including, but by no means limited to, the classics, philosophy, politics, cultural theory, literature, and music. Dr. West is the former professor of the practice of public philosophy at Harvard University, and he is professor emeritus at Princeton University. Cornel West graduated magna cum laude at Harvard and obtained his MA and PhD in philosophy at Princeton. He has written 20 books and edited 13. He is best known for his classics, Race Matters and Democracy Matters, and for his memoir, Brother West, Living and Loving Out Loud. His most recent book, Black Prophetic Fire, offers an unflinching look at 19th, 20th century African American leaders and their visionary legacies. Dr. West is a frequent guest on Real Time with Bill Meyer, CNN, C-SPAN, and Democracy Now! He has a passion to communicate to a vast variety of publics in order to keep alive the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a legacy of bearing witness to the truth and love and justice. Join me in welcoming Dr. Cornel West.
Ooh, thank you so much, brother. Thank you very much, brother. Thank you so very, very much. Indeed, indeed. You can hear me all right, is that right? So I think I'll put this here with my dear sister. What a blessing to be in conversation with you. Indeed, indeed. But I'm profoundly humbled to come to this consecrated space. History of Morgan State University. High quality, excellence, deep commitment, struggle for justice, and towering, exemplary figures. I want to salute each and every one of you for coming out. I hope I say something that unsettles you. I hope I say something that unnerves you. But I come in the spirit of learning and listening to you. I begin by saluting my very dear brother. He's a very, very special visionary and courageous leader in American higher education. I'm talking about my brother, President David Wilson. Let's give it up for this brother. 11 years. 11 years. I think he's the most unique figure I know when it comes to high quality leadership, universities and colleges. Someone who emerges from gut bucket Jim Crow, Alabama, way out with the magnificent country folk like my folk, you see, shanties, and yet at the same time as the youngest of 10, all of that grace and dignity that he gets from Father Henry and his mother Minnie, and Hebron Missionary Baptist Church that shapes him in such a way that he is equipped and fortified. So when he goes to Tuskegee, he just missed the Commodores, but we won't get into that. When he goes to Tuskegee, figures like Peter Harvey, you know, he's got the finest legal mind in America, graduate of Morgan State. He's getting fortified. On to Harvard University, getting fortified. Studies under a giant named Charles Willie. Let us never forget the Charles Willies of the world, who gave so much of themselves and poured so much into our dear brother, David Wilson and others. And then he's off to Auburn, the first Black person who's a senior administrator in quasi Jim Crow, Alabama. Because you know there's Jim Crow Senior and then Jim Crow Junior. And then there's a new Jim Crow, mass incarceration. So we still live under the shadow of Jim Crow. Let us be clear about that. But when you look at our dear brother, on then to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We met at Rutgers. I think you were then assistant provost or provost maybe. But never ever forgot from whence he came. You see. and 11 years now at this grand institution, 154 years of profound devotion. That's, for me, exemplary of what it means to come to terms with three themes that I want to highlight this morning: vocation, tradition, and revolution. Vocation, tradition, and revolution. I know we got Brother Raymond Wimbush, I love and respect so deeply, Jared Ball, and some of the other faculty. We should just give it up for faculty here at Morgan State University. And they're just the peak of the iceberg. But when you talk about the task of Black intellectuals, we're not talking about something abstract and obtuse. You're talking about concrete vocation. About vocation, what do I mean? Callings. What is your calling? Because the very anthem of Black people is what? Lift every voice. It doesn't say lift every echo. We don't need extensions of echo chambers. We don't need those who simply express what is inside of their silo. You talk about a vocation, that's what you are put here to do in time and space, given the short time between your mama's womb and the tomb. Who are you as the distinctive human being? Nobody like you. That's what Lift Every Voice is about. And it's grounded in integrity, honesty, dignity, generosity, and most importantly, a willingness to attempt to tell the truth. So when I talk about Black intellectuals, I'm not talking about those just in the academy. No, not at all. For me, the very sources of inspiration so often as a intellectual happens to be the musicians. If I could be half the intellectual that Curtis Mayfield was. Because being an intellectual is a truth teller, and the condition of truth is to allow suffering to speak. Being an intellectual, someone who is attempting to cast a focus or produce beauty. And beauty itself is rooted in a wrestling with tear and trauma. And most importantly, being an intellectual is falling in love with human beings such that you're willing to live and maybe even die for them. And let us be not deceived. There has never been a people in the modern world in the last 400 years who have been so chronically hated as Black people. And yet we keep dishing out love warriors, lovers of truth, in pursuit of truth, lovers of beauty, in pursuit of beauty, lovers of goodness, in pursuit of goodness. And some of us remain lovers of the holy. I'm a revolutionary Christian. I'm unapologetic about it. I come out from the chocolate side of Sacramento, California, Shiloh Baptist Church of Reverend Willie P. Cook from Gut Bucket, Jim Crow, Mississippi, and Deacon Hinton, loving me to death, and Sarah Ray, my vacation Bible teacher, who's telling me every Sunday, if the kingdom of God is within you, then everywhere you go, you ought to leave a little heaven behind. That's a wisdom that's honed out of looking at white supremacist bombardment and saying, we're going to preserve our sanity, we're going to preserve our dignity, we're going to concern our community. And the only way you do that is to learn how to straighten your back up. We used to have a brother show up every fifth Sunday. We call him Sylvester, but he's known to the world as Sly Stone. Sly would sit there on that organ, especially when it came a Hammond organ. And what would he do? He would give his heart, mind, and soul to empower a folk who have been taught to hate themselves and love them through his music to such a degree that they were willing to stand. So when he wrote the song, "Stand, you've been sitting much too long. There's a permanent crease in your right and wrong. Stand, there's a midget standing tall and the giant beside him about to fall. Stand, there's a cross for you to bear. Things to go through if you going anywhere. You can make it if you try." Everyday people, everybody is a star. That is what it is to be an organic intellectual, telling the truth from your heart, mind, and soul, saying what you mean, meaning what you say. No posing, no posturing, no peacocking here. Walking around strutting, look at me at my foliage. No, somewhere I read, by your fruits you shall know them, not their foliage. That's the tradition that we're talking about. That's the best of Black people. That's the best of us. So we begin with an acknowledgement of what has gone inside of us. We are who we are because somebody loved us, somebody cared for us, somebody attended to us, somebody poured themselves into us to such a degree that we could believe in ourselves, respect ourselves, have confidence in ourselves, and then find our voices and not just be an echo. I'm in Baltimore. Billie Holiday got to get down. She wasn't an echo. She didn't sound like Ella or Sarah or Dinah. She sounded like Billie. E. Franklin Frazier, one of the great Black intellectuals, found his voice from working class Baltimore, West Baltimore. Drew Hill, rhythm and blues. I won't go into no music too much. Rough Ends. Oh, yes. They found their voice, someone to love. Yes, that's not just entertainment. That's an expression of them wrestling with their humanity, such that in the face of what the great Howard Thurman would call the hounds of hell, of greed, hatred, hypocrisy, envy, resentment. How do you fortify yourself to push it back, to raise your voice, to take a stand, and then be organized and mobilized just like the Morgan students in 1947 with that mass demonstration, mass organizing, so that you raise your voice in a cacophony of voices so that it escalates the collectivity, so that we bring power and pressure to bear on status quos, on forms of oppression, forms of domination. Let us not be deceived. There has never, ever been a people in the last 400 years who have been so thoroughly terrorized on every level: psychic, spiritual, economic, political, and yet we keep dishing out freedom fighters in the face of that terror. What a history! What a great people at our best. Black people are world historical people who have disproportionately shaped the culture, the ways of life, stylizing space and time with speech and gesture and movement and swagger. And the whole world got to take notice, even as the powers that be try to crush us. To talk about the task of Black intellectuals is to situate and locate yourself within that tradition in light of your vocation. And imitation is suicide. If you're going to walk around and be a copy, then you're not going to make the contribution you ought to make. I tell my young brothers and sisters that when I go into the studio. I say, I'm old school. So Luther Vandross was an original. He wasn't a copy. Donny Hathaway was an original. He wasn't a copy. See? Aretha. James Baldwin. Love forces us to take off the mask we know we cannot live within, but fear we cannot live without. Toni Morrison, beloved, not a copy, original. Marvin Gaye's What's Going On? Every note and the silence between the notes shot through with a love and a commitment to freedom in his own voice, coming out of Chocolate, Washington, D.C., and on his way to Motown. These are not just celebrities, the way they are commodified and commercialized in mainstream culture, the way corporate media projects them as, oh, these great isolated black folk presenting some kind of success. No, black people have never been about solely success at our best. We're about greatness. And somewhere I read that he or she is greatest among you will be your servant. Will use whatever success you have in order to pour yourself out and empower, touch somebody, push somebody along, provide some inspiration and illumination, provide some vision so people can see things that they didn't see before, who could feel deeper than they have felt before, get beneath the surface, the superficial surface of American culture that is so often about narcissism, hedonism, truncated conceptions of success, and then going off and living large in some vanilla suburb, or too often turning one's back on brothers and sisters in the hood, tied to mass incarceration, decrepit schools, unavailable health care, unemployment and underemployment. That is the best of Morgan State University, dishing out love warriors, dishing out freedom fighters. Yes, I got my degree, but it's simply a weapon from me, just like the 6th chapter of Ephesians. I'm going to put on the whole armor, and it's going to be something I use and deploy in order to help somebody. How come? Start with yourself. Did you give birth to yourself? Did you teach yourself language? How did you gain access to your own self-respect and self-confidence? Somebody else pushed you along. The great Dorothy Heights used to talk about lifting as you climb. That's the best of Morgan State University. Yes, we going up. But just like Beyonce and Coachella, she ain't gonna show up as some isolated entertainer. She gonna bring the band with her. She gonna bring the tradition with her. She gonna play a little Larry Blackman cameo. She gonna play a little Maze for the tradition. Tradition and vocation go hand in hand. And just as vocation and invocation, or one's calling and the recalling, it is impossible to find your voice, find your vocation without a sense of history. It's like what Monk told Coltrane, quit imitating Johnny Hodges of the Duke Ellington Band. You're going to have to find your own voice. Train. Okay, Monk. Monk said, come to my house and listen to this. Monk started playing on the piano. And Train said, that just sounds wrong, Monk. He said, sometimes wrong is right. That's what it is to be original. You're in the world, but not of it. You're transforming the world. You're not just conforming to it. You're not tied to complacency and complicity. And most importantly, you're not a coward. You're not a coward. I know Brother Martin Luther King Jr. gave one of his historic speeches of his career right here at Morgan State University, 1958. Is that right, my dear brother? Right here on this campus. What did Martin used to say all the time? I'd rather be dead than afraid. Mary Ellen Pleasant. Her name ought to be a household name. She's a black woman. She was the first multi-millionaire black woman in California. She married a rich vanilla brother who was a robber baron. He was multi-millionaire, and he died. We don't know exactly what the cause was, but I don't think it had nothing to do with her, but he dropped dead. All of his money went to her. And what did she do? She gave a vanilla brother named John Brown $600,000 to support his movement till the day he was executed. And she had a note in his pocket from her. Then he founded centers for those wrestling with addiction and alcohol and poor folk. Why? Because she had been shaped by black people at our best, shaped by black churches and black institutions and black mosques and black synagogues saying what? Greatness has to do with the scope of your service to the least of these echoes of the 25th chapter of Matthew. And my calling is going to be one that have little to do with the eyes of the world. That I'm looking at something grander. And just like any form of black performance, anytime black people engage in performance, they're authorizing a better world in light of the white supremacist misery that they have to come to terms with. That's what the Gospels do. That's what the paintings do. That's what the beautiful buildings do. You come to Morgan, you say, Lord, they got a vision of a different world. What those students doing in there? Are they getting beyond success? Do they have a habitual vision of excellence and greatness? Do they know that they come from a great tradition of a grand people? And those in the past set the standard. People ask me all the time, Brother West, what is your witness about? I said, I can't be one half the man my father was. The world doesn't know that, so what? Can't be half the man, the human being my mother was. The world didn't know that, so what? I'm trying to put a smile on their face in the grave. They set the standards. And they're on a continuum of folk. Like the mother of Cab Calloway and Blanche Calloway. You know, Blanche Calloway was the first black woman to conduct a jazz orchestra. She graduated from Morgan State University. Sister Martha. You see, same tradition, same people. And I'm not saying that black tradition as a whole is at its best. We got a history of black thugs and gangsters. And I say that in love because I was a gangster before I met Jesus. Now I'm just a redeemed sinner with gangster proclivities. So I know the gangster in me. I know the thug in me. I didn't have to listen to Tupac to understand the thug in me. I was blessed to have Tupac as a student when I was at National Black United Front at Timbuktu School, 415 Atlantic Avenue, under Reverend Herbert Daltrey. He was 10 years old. And every Wednesday we'd have lectures with Ivan Van Sertima, James Cone. And I looked at that little brother. I told Finney, his blessed mother, was a member of the Black Panther Party. I said, this brother is kind of anointed. He got something going on. I don't know what the Lord going to do with him. She said, me either, Cornel. But he understood the battle going on inside of his soul. Thuggish, gangster, too much indifference, too much callousness, and then the other side, where his genius comes through. The love, the service, the discipline, the willingness to be an original, the courage in the face of fears. No accident that Marcus Garvey would always lead every rally with a sign. The Negro is not afraid, even when they sitting there shaking, holding it. But Negro is not afraid. Why is that important? Because you never find your voice. You never be in contact with the best of your tradition if you're scared and intimidated. That's what it is to niggerize a dignified African people. To teach them that they're less beautiful, less moral, less intelligent, and walk around scared and intimidated, laughing when it ain't funny, scratching when it don't itch, wearing the mask just in order to get through and navigate and negotiate in a white supremacist world. You'll never be able to sing the blues. You'll never be able to tell the truth. You'll never be able to organize the way these students organized in 1947, or the way E. Franklin Frazier raised his voice, or the way Benjamin Quarles, one of the great scholars of the 20th century, right here at Morgan State University. One can go on and on and on. How did they deniggerize themselves? Push that fear out. Push that sense of being intimidated out. And be true to the best of oneself. Well, it takes courage to be willing to give it all. One of my favorite lines, the 1960s, was a song that Curtis Mayfield wrote for Gene Chandler called Just Be True. Some of y'all might remember that song. I'm not going to sing it because I don't always stay in tune. But it goes something like, I've given you all of me and plan to give even more, baby. Now, how you going to give it all and plan to give even more? That's kenosis, K-E-N-O-S-I-S. That is the emptying of yourself after you've cultivated all the gifts that God has given you. When you're willing to sacrifice and serve and get in a whole lot of that good trouble that Brother John Lewis talked about. And when you're talking about getting in good trouble, it means oftentimes you're going to have to give up popularity for your own quest for integrity. And it's certainly true for we black folk. One must never, ever love black people in order for them to love you back. You love black people because they're worthy of being loved. And you tell the truth against the grain because you're not looking at what you're doing through the eyes of the world. You're looking at it through the eyes of powers that enable people to be love warriors, freedom fighters. And when we're traumatized, we choose to be wounded healers rather than wounded hurters. And when we're full of sorrow, we choose to be joy spreaders rather than joy crushers. Just think of Louis Armstrong. Everywhere he went, he just left a little heaven behind, just a little joy behind, with all of his genius. One of the greatest revolutionary artists of the last 400 years. And the same would be true of what happened in the Boogie Down Bronx in the late 70s. The creation of a whole art form that is now the universal language of young people in every corner of the globe. That's what hip hop is. And look how it came out of the blocks. Full of fire, full of love. And then the mainstream starts commodifying and commercializing it, want to make big money on it. It's nothing but a form of spiritual warfare against young black folk. So the young black folk think that their music is just about titillation and stimulation, rather about profound care and nurture. I was talking to my dear brother, Cyrus, and what's my dear brother's name again? Is Burke? Brother Bacon, absolutely. We were just talking in the car. I said, you know, one of the worst things that has happened for young black folk is for them not to have access to a music that is tender and gentle. See, the genius from Macon, Georgia, Otis Redding said, try a little tenderness. Even Roni for Babyface is a tenderoni. It's what James Baldwin said about Malcolm X. I never met a more tender black man. And you only see Malcolm X's tenderness through certain lens of black love. If you look at him through the white normative gaze, he gonna look different. But if you look at him through the lens of black love and black freedom, even when he's wrong, even when he say white brothers and sisters are devils, no, they're not devils, but devilish behavior, okay, I can show some lot of evidence for that. But when he's wrong, he says what he means and means what he says. When he changes his mind, you know he's serious. He's not playing a game. That's what love is. That's what Ashford and Simpson mean by ain't nothing like the real thing. And so often these days, with the market culture bombarding young black folk who are hungry and thirsty for the real thing, all they get is that little thin stuff like cotton candy. They bite down on it, and there's no there. See, I grew up with the Delphonics and the Dramatics and enchantment and emotions and Jones Girls, and those are not just entertainers. They gave their hearts and souls. Earth, Wind, and Fire. Maurice White. What were they doing? They were doing very much what the best of the black tradition that is concerned about telling the truth, exposing the lies, and fortifying oneself to be long-distance freedom fighters. I didn't say just woke. I'm all for young folk being woke, but if you stay woke, you're going to suffer from insomnia. You got to be fortified. So you're a long-distance runner. And when you love folk, you hate the fact they're being treated unjustly, but you're going to be in the race forever. You're going down swinging. Like Muhammad Ali or Ella Fitzgerald, you go down swinging. That's what warriors do. That's what fighters do. That's what soldiers do. We're losing that kind of revolutionary spirit. And by revolution, I'm not just talking about political and economic ones. Yes, you got to come to terms with wealth inequality. Yes, you got to come to terms with militarism, especially AFRICOM in Africa and military presences around the world. Yes, you got to come to terms with patriarchy. Yes, you got to come to terms with homophobia and transphobia and all the different evils and ideologies that lose sight of the humanity of people indeed. But revolution also has to do with how strong your spirit is, so that you won't sell out at your first possibility of gaining access to success and silence your voice. Or you won't become so well-adjusted to injustice and well-adapted to indifference that you lose your sense of profound sensitivity and solidarity to others in your family, your community, within black folk, within that black love spilling over to vanilla sides and indigenous peoples and Asians, and Latinos and others. But it begins on the chocolate side. Because one of the ways in which one is able to be successful in America for a black person is to love everybody but black people. Black folk just an afterthought. Everybody else got interests. Everybody else got their aspirations. But you want to be objective. I'm transcending race. Please get off the crack pipe. You will never be committed to a universal embrace of others if you can't embrace your own mama and daddy and grandparents and other folk who look like you. And therefore, what you think is a compassion for others ain't nothing but an imitation and emulation of it for your own narrow success. So you can walk around as the first black X, the first black Y. Spare me. There's been folks smarter than you, more sophisticated than you in Gut Bucket, Georgia, Mississippi, anywhere else. You just happen to be the black person at this particular moment. Get a sense of your vocation, root yourself in tradition, and have a revolutionary spirit that has to do with a love and a freedom and a sense of tenderness, kindness, and soulfulness. So I was blessed to work with a genius named Bootsy Collins. It's from Capital of the World. We wrote 2 songs together. And yeah, that's exactly him. And Bootsy would always say, you walk into his studio and you see Clyde Stubblefield's drumsticks that he gave, the first one to get the drummer song, and didn't need no computer in those days. That was real drummer song that he was playing with himself. But he would always say, Brother West, we're losing our soulfulness. And soul is the sharing of a soothing sweetness of a people against the backdrop of a grim catastrophe that inspires and enables and allows them to keep fighting. And thank God that we've got young folk here, Morgan State University, with high quality faculty, with the visionary and courageous administrators that say, we are going to remain tied to the best of our tradition. So when we talk about the basic tasks of intellectuals, we're talking about waves in a larger ocean. And the question becomes, what kind of wave you going to be? That's the challenge. You all been very kind to allow me to go on and on. We're going to have good time for dialogue. And I'm open to staying as long as you want to stay. I just go with the spirit. I don't believe in calendar time. I don't believe in chronos. So you all push me so we can attempt to find our voices together as we focus on vocation, voice and calling, tradition, our interpretation of the past, and revolutionary spirit, the turning of the world around. Jesus running out the money changers in the temple, not because he hates people with money, but because when greed is tied to callousness with people in power, they must be rendered accountable. And he ends up on a cross for that particular act. And you don't see that Jesus on too many churches, do you? Oh, that's too big of a challenge. But that is the Jesus that has made such a crucial contribution to the understandings of black folk. And even when they become secular, even when they break loose, some of them move to Muslim status, like the great Malcolm X, whose father was a Baptist minister. Or Bell Hooks, one of the great intellectuals of the last 50 years, Buddhist. But she's already been shaped in Kentucky, in those churches with that discourse about this Jesus that is over against the greed and the hatred and the envy and the resentment. So the most broad and comprehensive analysis of the modern world with all of its markets and nation states and bureaucracies and civic associations has to begin with moral and spiritual lens through which you view the world, so you are fortified to be able to sustain your calling in light of the tradition with a revolutionary spirit, and most importantly, to pass it on to the younger generation. And that's the crisis we're living in right now. Because we live in an empire of such overwhelming spiritual decay and moral decrepitude, survival of the slickest, obsessed with the 11th commandment, thou shalt not get caught. Say anything, do anything, no accountability, no answerability, no responsibility. It's just success. I made it, I made it, I made it. Don't confuse making it with keeping the faith. They're not the same thing. And we have to say that every generation. And that's what's been happening for 154 years at this grand institution. And I'm going to stop now because it's time for that.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
I guess it's now time to pass that plate around, right? So we've had our Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to say that I come from Gut Bucket, Georgia.
Oh, yes.
Macedonia Baptist Church in Conyers, Georgia.
Macedonia.
Made a little detour to the north and went to Abyssinian Baptist Church.
Oh,
I'm still a member of Abyssinian and the Open Church of Maryland here. So it shaped me a lot. I want to pick up on some of the last point you were making. When I left the New York Times after 13 years there, I had the hardest time explaining to my parents, Johnny and Minnie Oldership, why I had left a good job. You have famously left good jobs time and again. Will you share with our audience, especially those who are still mapping the contours of career, your thoughts about being true to yourself, but also being mindful of the security of those good jobs, especially when one is in a category of people for whom good jobs are hard to come?
Oh, I appreciate the question. And again, your work at the New York Times has really been just quite magnificent. I've never got a chance to really tell. I want to tell you that in public.
Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Now, when you tell me about Macedonia Baptist, I said, "Oh, I see. It's working through you. It's working through you." No, but see, I'm one of the most blessed of human beings in the late modern world. You see, I grew up with Irene and Cliff West, and Cynthia and Cheryl and Cliff. We had supernatural love at our crib, at our house. And I mentioned Shiloh as well. I know what my brother here is married. Yeah, exactly. Married to a Shiloh sister. Is that right? So you know exactly what I'm talking about. See, when you receive that much love, you go astray. Everybody go astray, but it leaves such an imprint on your soul. It really does. And so I wear all of these institutions like a loose garment. They're just a context for struggle. They're just a context for my vocation, my interpretation of the tradition, and so forth. You see. And so, I take 65% cut in pay. And it's tough because, I've been married and got some alimony challenges and things. So I got to do, some lectures, bring in some cash and so forth. But the money doesn't really mean that much to me as long as it's there and my kids doing all right and, my wife holding on. And she got her money too. I don't want to act like she depended on me, but I'm going to get in trouble. This is on tape.
It's being live streamed.
Ooh, love you, honey. Love you, baby. Love. But the thing is that I can't allow anything, any institution, anybody, no matter what color, to dampen my fire. This is what I'm called here to do. Y'all know the song by Walter Hawkins, What Is This? Whatever it is, it won't let me what? Hold my peace. That's true for all of us in light of our calling. You see. And so you're right. When you left, and people say, oh my God, New York Times, that is the height of the establishment of the white liberal so-and-so. And the status is real, but you got to use the status. Once that status starts using you, time to go. Time to go. Time to go. And it's true in any context. I mean, I've been blessed to teach in prisons because people often ask me, Brother West, how come you don't teach in historically black institutions? I said, I got great love and respect for them. But I've been teaching for 41 years in a historically black institution called the prison system. You see, I'm with the brothers all the time. You see, they got the same challenge too. They can be conformists. They can be cowardly. They can be gangster. Or they can have integrity. They can have generosity. And they can meet the challenge. And some of the greatest black freedom fighters, black love warriors come through prisons, haven't they? Absolutely. All genders, all sexual orientations, and so forth. So I think, again, for me, I've been blessed enough to be able to hold on to my vocation, even when I'm wrong, and I have to, all of us are fallible and finite and fallen. But I've been lucky enough to try to put together certain scraps of money in order to sustain myself. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But how did you do it when you left?
Well, first I made the statement when people ask me, how can you leave? What are you going to do? I said, well, I'm so blessed to see that there's life beyond the plantation. Ooh. And that was kind of the way I felt it, that I had done what I could do there, right. But it was time to move on to something else that sort of spoke to my soul the way that place did not at the time.
Absolutely.
So I think we see that in you. Let me ask about another aspect of your experience. You've gone hard on Barack Obama over the years. During his presidency, you described him as a war president with a Peace Prize. That's the Nobel Peace Prize. A black mascot for Wall Street oligarchs and a black muppet of corporate plutocrats. A Rockefeller Republican in blackface. More recently, you have indicated that President Biden could be a much stronger force for good against white supremacy than Barack Obama was. And you said, quote, Obama had the skills, he's brilliant, he's black, he's poised, and so forth. Didn't have the courage, end of quote. For some black folks, Dr. West, those are some fighting words.
Oh, I understand.
So two questions.
Absolutely.
Two questions. Is this personal? And how do you separate the personal from the critique that you see as the task of black intellectuals?
Well, one, I appreciate it. One is, see, there's no deep disappointment without high expectation. And I was one of those who supported Brother Barack Obama early on when he had 4% increase of the support in the black community in Iowa. Most black folk didn't jump on the bandwagon until South Carolina, you see. And I was there with Axelrod and the others, but I had told him early on when we talked, first time we talked was 4 hours. I said, brother, I am a Jesus-loving free black man who builds on the legacy of Martin King and Fannie Lou Hamer, and therefore I'm concerned about poor and working people. I want black middle-class success, but I don't look at the black community through black middle-class success. That's not the benchmark of black progress. The benchmark has to do with the plight of the least of these. And he understood. So that I did 65 events for the brother. Last night in Iowa, 12 hours straight and so forth. But as soon as he brought in Robert Rubin and others with Wall Street against everyday people, and then bailed out Wall Street with trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars, and homeowners went under, and the black middle class lost 58% of its home ownership. And nobody wanted to raise their voices for the most part. I said, no, that's a Keith Sweat moment. Something just ain't right. Something just ain't right. Now, I had called George Bush a war criminal because he dropped 53 drones, killing hundreds of innocent people in Somalia, in Pakistan, and others. Barack Obama started dropping twice as many. He ended up with almost 570, killing thousands of civilians. You see, when we learned in Shiloh Baptist Church, Jesus loved the little children, all the children of the world, red and yellow, black or white, they are precious in his sight. That a life in Pakistan, a life in Libya, a life in Somalia has exactly the same value as a black life in West Baltimore and a white life on the other side of town. Made in the image and likeness of God. That's militarism that Martin King and the others, especially Fannie Lou Hamer, especially Stokely Carmichael, were concerned about, you see. So that and when I saw, won't touch the new Jim Crow, I said, well, how are you going to have a black president that can't raise one word against the neo-slavery of mass incarceration? Well, Brother West, he got structural constraints. He's a black man way up there at the top, the black face of the empire. He only do so many things. I understand. Give a speech about it. Say something, man. These folks are suffering down here. You see? Oh, you're putting too much pressure on him. No, because then when he met with the Wall Street, 13 firms on Wall Street, what did he say? He said, I stand between you and the pitchforks, but don't worry, I will protect you. I stand with you. You don't tell Wall Street that. You tell Drew Hill that. That's my tradition. Wall Street already got all the support they need. You put pressure on Wall Street so that they can provide certain kinds of resources and so forth, but you don't need folk who come from a people who's so exploited, so degraded, that when they get up there, they adjust it to the powerful. It's wrong. Brother Info may tell you, it's wrong. So that my language sometimes, gets a little stretched out. You know what I mean? But I'm telling you, that when you're loving folk who are getting crushed, it's hard to be polite sometimes. It really is. Now, at the same time, for those who attacked Brother Barack Obama, because he was always my brother. It's Sister Michelle, I brought her to Princeton. We raised $125,000. She graduated from Princeton. We raised $125,000 every time she see me. She give me a hug, I give her a hug. Because of the victory they won. But for me, the victory is not just winning the election. It's what happens when you get there. What are you willing to push in terms of programs for poor people, supporting trade unions, putting pressure on Wall Street, all of that greed at the top 1% of the population own 42% of the wealth. That's obscene. There's no moral grounds for that when people are homeless and suffering and you got educational systems that don't even have quality books and so forth and so on. And so then Biden comes along. Biden supported war crimes himself, both the drones, invasion, occupation of Iraq, and he's an architect of mass incarceration. And we got to choose between him and a neo-fascist gangster named Trump. Now, that is a description of the black predicament. The choice between a neoliberal gangster and a neo-fascist gangster. What you gonna do? Well, you got to go to neoliberal. Biden's better. Because fascism, across the board, is evil on steroids. But even in the system that we're living in right now, the evil is still there in very deep structural institutional forms for poor people, for black people, for working people. You see. And so I ended up with a critical support of Biden. Now we find out, you know, he don't want to touch the filibuster. He's very deferential to Manchin and so forth. And we got to hit him head on. I've been hitting him hard, especially on Brother Charles Blow's show, because Charles Blow's been magnificent. You knew him at the Times as well, you see. So that, and that's, but what's fascinating to me is that, you know, I run in a lot of black folk now, and they say, you know, Brother West, I called you everything but a child of God during the Obama years. But the more I listen, the more I see some of the realities you were talking about. The suffering is still there, you see. That black face in a high place is symbolic, but it only has substance if you got spine to use that high place to help folk catching hell. You see, that's the best of black folk. We love Tuskegee. But look at Du Bois's critique of Booker T. Washington. Out of deep love. Booker T, love him to death. Tuskegee is one of the great institutions in American life. There would be no Tuskegee without Booker T. Washington. But that doesn't mean Booker T. Washington ought not to also be criticized in regard to his conceptions of education, in regard to his with pulling back on civil rights and so forth and so on. And I'm sitting right in front of one of the most distinguished graduates of Tuskegee, our dear brother right here. Am I making sense, my? Absolutely. No, I don't want to just put you in a corner like that. You know, no, Brother West, you ain't making no sense at all, Negro. Which is fine with me, because we brothers and we disagree on things. And I'm still Barack's brother. I mean, his daughter's right there at home. And I think she actually voted for Bernie, but that's just a footnote. But the thing is that we can agree, disagree, but we had to be honest and candid. Du Bois was candid with Booker T. Washington, even as he affirmed Booker T. Washington's positive dimensions and was critical of his reluctance to support liberal arts education and so forth and so on.
It seems that we don't have many, there's not a lot to support dialogue that allows you to differ on certain aspects of someone's public statements or public life. Either have to pick one thing or the other. People are good or they are villains.
Yeah.
Arguments have to be simplified to Twitter length. So we can't have those kind of discourses where you can make it clear to people that when you criticize Obama, it's not because you don't respect what others are respecting, the attainment that he has made as becoming this first black president.
You're absolutely, and that's so eloquently put, though.
Well, here's along those same lines. We are now marking the death of General Colin Powell. To quote Sister Nikki Giovanni, how do we judge a man? In this case, how do we judge General Powell? Dr. Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham, one of your former colleagues at Harvard, is president of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. And she said in a beautifully written piece, when I think of the passing of Colin Powell on October 18, 2021, my heart is filled with a gnawing sadness at the loss of this great man, and yet also filled with profound appreciation for his life of service to our country. Perhaps not strange at all, my thoughts about his death are interrupted by Langston Hughes' famous poem, I Too, and the even more famous first verse, I Too Sing America, which rings out in my mind as if a praise song for General Powell, close quote. So, Dr. West, how do we judge this man, who was a man of war, but also a man of peace, who was a Republican, and many other things that were evidence of a very complicated personality?
And I love that word of complication, see, because again, at the level of symbol, he became the most prominent soldier in the American killing machine. Now, what is significant about that? Success. He's a brilliant man. He's a hardworking man. He's a disciplined man. He dealt with white supremacy every day in the U.S. Army. I'm in solidarity against white supremacy. I'm in solidarity with Clarence Thomas if the police beating him up the way they was beating up the brothers and sisters every day. But I agree with Clarence Thomas about 2.5% of the time. But I'm against white supremacy when white supremacists mistreat him, you see. So that at that symbolic level, Colin Powell, the highest level of success. Now, was he great? Hell no. Not at all. You see what he did in Vietnam? Read what he did in Vietnam. Supporting the bombs on innocent people. Read what he did to Aristide in Haiti. You know about the lie of the United Nations that he did honestly say after that he was sorry, but at that point, you got 500,000 Iraqis dead. Iraqi life has the same value as any other human life. I don't care who they are. You see. And so I have a critique of American militarism. I don't care what color they are. You see. And I spent time with brother Colin. He was a wonderful brother. And as I said, I would tell him, man, I'm just so glad the ways in which you have a dignity and support the black folk and others in your context. The same way I try to do that in the university. Support black folk and others in the university context. But if they graduate and say, I'm going off to drop drones on innocent people, I say, you're going to be one of those successful ones. You're never going to be great. Well, did you waste your time on me? Well, let me pray on it. No, I didn't, because I don't want people to just agree with me. I want them to find their own voice. You see, and he found his own voice as one who supported American militarism. Same with true with the AFRICOM system that we talked about right now, that he expanded and so forth. So we have to make moral choices, political choices based on a spiritual and moral criteria, and then also acknowledge the symbolic role that he played in fighting against white supremacy. And so I love Evelyn to death, Higginbotham, but she's more of a patriot than I am. You see, for me, every flag is under the cross. Every flag. And that cross signifies unarmed truth and unconditional love. And anybody who puts the flag over the cross is living a life of idolatry, of nationalism and tribalism and clannishness and so forth and so on. And that's true for every flag. That's true in Ethiopia right now. Critical of what's happening in Ethiopia. Critical of what's happening in Haiti. These are black folk. But my cross is not just the Christian cross, even though for me as a Christian it is. But you can be secular and say, yeah, Brother West, I'm an internationalist. I'm a universalist. I do believe in unarmed truth and unconditional solidarity with oppressed people, or the wretched of the earth that Frantz Fanon talked about. And therefore, all forms of nationalism must be subordinate to moral and spiritual criteria. So no matter how high you go up in the army, I want to know what your army's doing. I turned out to be the best soldier. What were you soldiering? That's the question. I mean, I was blessed to give a talk at West Point. And they had the big old Robert E. Lee. I said, you got this gangster right behind me. What is going on here? Insurrectionist supporting the violent overthrow of the U.S. government. He was superintendent of West Point for many years. That's why I still had him up there. I said, well, let me tell y'all something. I'm a soldier too, but I'm a different kind of soldier than you all are. We used to sing that in Shiloh Baptist Church. We are soldiers in the army. We got to fight. Hey, we warriors. We fighting for love. Are we extremists? Yes, we're extremists for love. We fight for justice? Yes, and justice is what love looks like in public, the way tenderness is what love feels like in private. I'm an extremist with tenderness. Oh, Brother West, that means you You must be gay brother and lesbian sister. They into tenderness. Now you don't know all gay brothers and lesbian sisters. That some of them got tender challenges too. Because it's a human thing. It's a human thing. There ain't nothing wrong with tenderness, nothing wrong with sweetness, nothing wrong with gentleness and toughness. You see, because it embraces all of us, no matter who we are. And so I certainly, I pray for his family, and his soul and so forth as a Christian and human being. But in terms of my critique, I would follow. I don't know if you all know the important Black Alliance for Peace with Brother Jamu Baraka and Margaret Wimberly. We just lost the great Glenn Ford, the Black Agenda report. These are truth tellers in terms of keeping track of the militarism and so forth. And I think their voices need to be taken very, very, very seriously. Very, very serious. I'm sorry it goes on so long on that though.
I want to invite people to come up to the microphones so we can take a
absolutely.
few questions from the audience.
Absolutely. But what is your take on Brother Colin now?
It's pretty much what you were saying, but I'm still a journalist, so I don't tell too much of what I'm thinking unless it's in my columns. Let me ask one more as people are lining up here. I want to ask about another person who you've known and I've known a long time, Reverend Al Sharpton.
Oh, Brother Sharpton.
I've known him since the days of the process hair and the neon-colored pantsuits.
Oh, yeah.
But he credits you with being among those who helped him in his acquisition of knowledge, to broaden his scope of what social justice was or could be. Will you discuss the evolution of Reverend Sharpton from one Du Bois preacher to the person who was mocked as ambulance chaser and street hustler to the person that he is today, and what lessons are there for people here?
Yeah, see, we need a seminar on Brother Al. You know that. Al, he's a fascinating brother, and it's true. I've been blessed to know him now for almost 40 years. We actually started right there in Brooklyn. And Brother Cyrus was saying he booked in the National Black United Front. See, at that time, actually, he was spending a lot of time with my precious Black nationalist brothers and sisters from the Nation of Islam and other organizations as a Christian preacher, mainly because they were willing to speak out more directly against the police brutality. That's where he started his career, you see. And that's very important. So we had a long talk at Sylvia's restaurant. And I told him, I said, it's unclear exactly where you actually stand on this thing. He's, Brother West, I'm having a rough time. We talked about the legacies of Martin and Malcolm, Fannie Lou and Claudia Jones and so forth and so on. And then he is always there. I like that about that brother. He's always there. He learned that from Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson hears about a police shooting in Idaho. That brother is there in the morning. I don't know how he got there. Now people say, well, he's addicted to the camera. Well, that's one way of describing it. It's probably a combination. He's probably addicted to the camera. He's committed. Sharpton's a committed brother. I love that about it. But boy, we've had some big fights. We've had some major fights over issues of predatory capitalism, success, and so forth. But when he went to jail for 90 days, critical of American militarism in Puerto Rico and Vieques, for those days, came out with that beautiful beard. I was right there with his wife, Kathy, to give him a hug. Because I love my brother, even when he's right, even when he's wrong, you see. And so in that sense, I supported him in 2004 when he ran for president because he was the most progressive voice, but he wasn't up against a lot. The bar is so low in American politics. You can just mention the poll twice a month, and that makes you more progressive than most politicians. But he's there. He's consistent, and he is brilliant. And he's got a certain church-like spirit that speaks to me. But I've been very, very critical on him when it comes to issues of drones and Wall Street. The same critique that I have of Barack Obama.
Mm-hmm. And he says he's learned from that. So
no, and he has. But Sharpton is he's always on the move. You know, it's hard. He's elusive. I put it that way. He's elusive. But I love my brother. I really do.
Mhm. Let's take a question from the audience.
Yes. Is freedom possible for Black people in this white supremacist society? Like genuine, substantive, concrete freedom, not symbolic, but real freedom?
Oh, it's a tough question, brother. It's a tough question. You remember what Henry Highland Garnett said, 1837, standing there on his crutch, he only had one leg. He said, Black folk never confuse the situation of Black people with that of the Israelites of the Old Testament. For us, Pharaoh is on both sides of the bloody Red Sea. That's Henry Highland Garnett. And then somebody sing a song. Because somebody just sing a song just to empower us, to get a sense of our predicament, you see. When the boys jumped on the ship, what did he say on the ship when he left? He said, cheer up. The Negro can never win in America. Must move to the international stage. I'm going to Ghana. I'm going to Africa. I'm going to connect Latin America, Caribbeans, and so forth. And when he said can't win, he was not talking about individual success. He was talking about the treatment of the poor and working people. That's what he was looking at. So that I think it's an open question. I don't know. If white supremacist America is as sick as it often appears to be, then it's going to be very difficult for them to respect and treat with dignity Black, poor, and working people. And if they can't, then Black folk will never be free as a community. We'll just have highly successful individual Black people. That's different. And we know that's the case because we've already pulled that off. But we have not yet begun to move toward the kind of freedom that our brother was raising. Now you got Afro pessimists, you know, who I appreciate their voices, and they say, well, you know, Black folk are like cattle waiting to be slaughtered. It will always be abject, will always be subordinated, will always be dominated. And then the question becomes, well, does that paralyze you? Why are you so surprised that white supremacy is evil? The question is, how are you going to fight? Even if you got a chance of a snowball in hell, you fight anyway. Somebody's coming for your mama and you think that they're going to win. So what? You go down fighting for your mama. That's who you are. That's who we are as a people. We still sing our songs. We still keep swinging. We love our children. We love our community. Well, you don't really have a chance. That's not what I'm focused on right now, because if I focus on that, I'm going to be less effective in my fight. I got to fight, period. And that's what the Afro pessimists, you know, they often say to me, they say, well, Brother West, I think it might be in vain. No, it ain't in vain. If a professor can touch one precious student at Morgan State University, that's a form of fighting that's worthy. That's worthy. Well, that's not going to create liberation, everybody. I know I'm not confusing the two, but I got my focus on Jamal and Letitia right here. And they then will have some seeds that they'll plant. Well, will they ultimately be free? I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to run around telling me, oh, yes, all you got to do is produce more Black middle-class folk. America's going to be a free place. No, that's not true. We have to be honest about that, you see. So the answer to that tough question is open question. Incomplete, unfinished. We don't know. We just don't know.
Okay. Professor Dawkins.
Good afternoon, Dr. West. Welcome to Morgan. I'm Wayne Dawkins. I'm E.R. Shipp's colleague at this campus's School of Global Journalism and Communication. And here's my question. I'm going to circle back to the second question. In public, it looked like a beef between two Black Ivy League titans. However, when you gave the Ware lecture in 2015 at my congregation's General Assembly, you candidly and succinctly explained why you were so critical of President Barack Obama. So I'm hoping, again, with feeling, can you share what you said specifically in this forum?
At the where now, was that in Portland
Yes,
with the Unitarians?
yes, I am a lifelong Unitarian
God bless you,
Universalist.
though. It's a rich denomination.
I can refresh your memory.
Yeah. Tell me what I said, though, brother. You got a
What
better
you said basically, what I recall, and we have tape on uua.org, was that your criticism of Obama was that he did not have those Wall Street robber barons prosecuted critically, criminally.
That's right.
You said basically fines and admonitions did not cut it.
That's exactly right. Oh, I'm so glad you remind me, my brother. So this school of global journalism was not historic and first rate for nothing. You're absolutely right, though, brother. But I mean, it was implicit in what I said here when I talked about the cozying up to Wall Street, protecting Wall Street. Because I think I probably went on to.
I want you to drive right down the interstate and answer the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. In fact, you remember I said something else too now, because now it's coming back to me. I'm a little older than you, so it takes me a while for the memory to kick in. But I went on to say, isn't it something when a brother and sister get caught with a crack bag that they get prosecuted across the board, but you get gangsters involved in insider trading, market manipulation, fraudulent activity, and predatory lending, and they walk off free sipping tea. That's what I also said, to show the contrast of the levels of justice. And you say that not out of hatred. Oh, you must hate Wall Street folk. Christians hate sin and still try to love the sinner. We hate injustice and still try to love the human beings who are involved in the injustice because it's inside of us. We're trying to die every day in order to emerge as new beings. You see, but it's exactly. I'm so glad you mentioned that, brother, because I had forgot. I had forgot, and I get a chance to kind of spell that out of the Wall Street thing. And again, we said in love with Barack. It's just Barack was wrong. It's two left shoes. It's wrong. It's wrong.
Okay, good question. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see them. Go ahead.
Dr. West,
Yeah.
Felicia Thomas.
Oh, how you doing? Felicia from Princeton?
Welcome to Morgan State. So good to see you.
So good to see you. Lord,
So let me take this opportunity to thank you for the investment that you made in my intellectual development at Union Theological Seminary. And I have a simple question for you, and that is, would you comment on the role of the liberal arts in the training of Black intellectuals?
Oh, what a blessing, what a blessing. Indeed. One of the most
And Walter says hello.
distinguished graduates of, she was also pastor of the historic Black Baptist Church in Princeton. And she's prophetic voice of the highest order. It's just so good to set eyes on her. When you think of the liberal arts, you're really talking about how do you muster the courage to think critically for yourself? How do you muster the courage to attend to the things that matter? Life and death and joy and sorrow, not just superficial passing pleasures. We got a younger generation that has been bombarded by a culture of commodities in which they're involved too often in joyless quest for insatiable pleasures. But he's stimulated to the core and still empty on the inside. And the most vicious thing you can ever do to a people is try to rob them of their cultivation of the capacity to love. And there is no love without care, nurture, intimacy, and vulnerability. When I hear Lil Wayne talking about how to love, I want to know how to love. That's a profound question. Because if you haven't learned vulnerability and intimacy and sweetness and kindness, you're going to just lust your way all through life. And you're going to run into a dead end with all the stimulation in the world. Now just hook up to an orgasm machine and just have orgasm for the next 55 years and discover how empty it is. You're going to need some conversation and touch and connection, you see. And so the liberal arts is an attempt to get people to think critically, attend to what matters, and then to undergo spiritual formation and ethical cultivation to become a compassionate, living, and courageous soul. You see, that's the important thing. And it's not just a matter of smart. Let the phones be smart. We got to be wise. We got to be loving. We have to be sacrificial. And so the liberal arts at its best is about all three of those things, my dear Sister Felicia. And I know that's very much at work here at Morgan and Howard and Harvard and Chicago and Xavier and other places. But we also got to keep in mind, it's only 31% of our fellow citizens who even go to college. You see, we got precious brothers and sisters of all colors who don't come near a college. And sometimes they go far beyond the folk who did go to college. James Baldwin never went to college, but the college went through him. Curtis Mayfield dropped out in 8th grade. I'm trying to catch up with him. I got a PhD. Because he got a genius. He's got a deep love, discipline in what he was doing. And gonna just tune his guitar just with the back notes on the piano. He's the only guitar player in the history of the guitar to tune his guitar just with the black notes he learned from his grandmother, who was an evangelist preacher. How you do that, Curtis? Well, listen to my last album, New World Order, and me and Roger put it together, this transgeneration. No, he's computer man. I'm 1970s and the 60s coming together in Atlanta. How you gonna work it out, Curtis? And that beautiful smile he got. Well, just listen to the album and think. I'm paralyzed from my neck down, but I still got my voice like Teddy Pendergrass. And I'm still gonna sound good just with my voice, but the rest of my body's dull. Ooh, what greatness. What greatness. Ain't got nothing to do with a degree. Nothing to do with a credential. Because he used what he had. And if you do have a degree and credential, use it. And then see what you come up with. See how far it goes. And we got students in this room, you all gonna use it. Is that right? Students here gonna use it. You're gonna use it strong. In the best tradition of great people. Hey, you're gonna be sitting in the core of what the best of Morgan State is all about. Even given what they got the homecoming this week, North Carolina.
We got homecoming here.
That's what I'm talking about. You got the homecoming right here.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go and have a good time and break a rug and everything. Come back fortified. Come back fortified. Oh, yes, absolutely.
Let's take one more on this side.
Hello, Dr. West. My name is Kaylin Ryan, and I am the first Little Miss Morgan State University. And I would like to know what books do you recommend for sixth graders? Because I am in middle school now.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Good God Almighty. For sixth graders. I'm trying to think of what I gave my precious daughter when she was in sixth grade. I gave her Langston Hughes's poems. I gave her County Cullen's poem, especially on the Black Christ. See, these days they've got a whole genre of children's literature that I don't really know about because I'm unable to stay in contact with it. But what I would do is I would take my precious daughter to the bookstore and look at all of these different books that they have on figures, and especially figures like Ida B. Wells Barnett, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass. We have to have concrete examples of freedom fighters and love warriors. Now, I think Du Bois's second wife wrote a book on Frederick Douglass, Shirley Graham.
Mm-hmm. I think she did.
I think she did. That would probably be one of the examples. But I think there's a number of examples that I don't know because I'm no longer in contact with the literature. Do you know a book that you think is worth reading for sixth grade? It's hard to think, though, isn't it? Does anybody else help our dear sister out, help all of us out? What would be a good book? Oh, beautiful, beautiful. You all connecting. Write that down, oh, sisters. Yeah, write that down. Absolutely.
That
So-
reminds me, don't we have a visiting high school class or some school that's visiting today? Who knows? Say who you are.
Yeah, let's give it up. Let's get up. Give it up to our folks. Right on, right on.
All right, great.
Right on. And what's the name of the school? XLK. Oh, Carol. Oh, Academy. Yeah.
Well,
Fantastic.
welcome.
So we're blessed to have you all here. Very blessed to have you.
Okay, question over here.
Hi, Dr. West. How are you?
How you doing, my dear sister?
So you mentioned how people have asked you, why don't you teach at Black institutions? And you made
Speak up a little bit.
Sorry, I have a soft voice. You made a comparison with Black institutions and, prisons. So I wanted to know if you could speak on that a bit more. And when we were speaking about Colin Powell, I wanted to know, which I think is a simple question, but is it possible to be a hero and a villain at the same time? Because I feel like people struggle to understand that two truths can exist at the same time.
Ooh, that's a profound point. That's a powerful point, my dear sister. That's part of what I was trying to say when I talked about all of us have inside of our souls a battlefield where war is going on. You see. And so there's heroic side to it, and there's a propensity toward cowardliness, conformity, and being indifferent to the suffering of others. See, we Christians call it sin. You see. And the question is, how do you wrestle with that? So you're absolutely right there. And the question is, how do we help each other become stronger truth tellers, more courageous? And that's why we have to be listening to other voices and connected to other voices in movements. That's why I kept coming back to 1947 here at Morgan State. They went to jail, didn't they? Over 300 went to jail. Reminds me what Martin Luther King Jr. told the young folk when 3,000 went to jail in Birmingham, didn't they? The children. What did Martin say to the children? He said, put your cemetery clothes on, because that's how serious it is. And what did Malcolm say to Martin? Martin, you ought to be ashamed that you have these children doing this. Where are the adults? Where are the men? Where are the women going to jail at the same scope and breadth as these children? Now, of course, Malcolm's saying that in Harlem, so he's not in gut bucket American apartheid. He's saying that on 125th Street and 7th Avenue. But it was a fascinating discussion. Do you put your children in that vulnerable situation when you know they can be crushed by white supremacist terrorists? That's a serious discussion. But it's the courage, and that is what is important in terms of 1947 Morgan, the willingness to be able to come together, accent that best side, as it were. Now, your first question was about the
HBCUs?
Oh yeah, it's sort of back. See, the thing is that you got professors, I mean, of all colors, because you got Vanilla and other professors at Black colleges who also have deep care and concern for students, especially Black students. The bottom line is the quality of the love, care, concern, and commitment to the empowerment of students, Black students, wherever you are. Wherever you are, you see. You could be at a Black college and don't have enough love of Black folk. You just got a job. I'm not saying nobody in here got that, but but that's a possibility. You see what I mean? That you could be out in Nevada. Don't have a whole lot of chocolate folk who of African descent. They got a lot of Chicanos out there, you see, who are deeply devoted to Black folk. That's going to be the criteria. Now, when you then decide that you're going to spend your major part of your career and your calling at a historically Black institution, like our dear brother David Wilson, President Wilson, you see. That I do think that it is an even more beautiful thing. It really is. It's an even more beautiful thing. There's no doubt about that. Because it then means that you don't have to go off to all black context like I do, let's say in prisons. And so, not all black, but it's just disproportionately black in prisons. But the same black care, black concern, black focus on empowering folk, we share together, me and Brother Wilson. Does that make sense of what I'm saying?
Yes.
Absolutely. Now, I'll add this too, that I've been blessed to have graduate students, and over 50% of my graduate students come from black colleges. So when they come from the Morgan State universities and Tuskegee and so forth, they come to Harvard, Princeton, what have you. Sister Felicia would tell you about Union Theological Seminary. I was just at Abyssinian. I just preached at Abyssinian with Calvin Butts. He's one of the great figures. Morehouse brother. Oh, yes, he's one of the great figures. Building on Sam Proc, building on Adam Clayton Powell Jr., building on Adam Clayton Powell Sr., all the way back to Charles Satchel Morris. Rich tradition of Abyssinian, right? But so many of those folk, black colleges, and then went to graduate school. And if they didn't go to Howard, another historic place for graduate school, a lot of them will go to predominantly white institutions for graduate school. And then the question will be, can they sustain and preserve their deep care, concern, love, commitment to the empowerment of students, and especially focusing on black students? You remember I mentioned Charles Willie, who was a Morehouse man. He was a great figure. He's there at Harvard. And what was he? He was a magnet, though, wasn't he? I mean, I wasn't even in school education. I'm spending all the time with Charles Willie. How come? I just love his spirit, his vibe, his brilliance, his intellect, his humor. And he allowed me to preserve my sanity. You know what I mean? It's like listening to the OJs. Love, he just helped me preserve my sanity because he had so much love coming out of him. That's just who he was, you see. He reminded me of folk in Shiloh and Oak Park and Glen Elder, where I came from, you see, in that white context. You see. But we knew we had to engage it. We knew we had to engage it. But the crucial thing, my sister, is not just where people are, it's what they do. That's the fundamental issue, at least for me. And I hope that makes sense, my dear. Absolutely.
It does. Thank you.
Indeed. No, God bless you.
I see Dr. Wilson standing. Is that my cue that we should be winding up?
Do we take as many
Four more
questions as you like?
questions?
As many
Okay,
questions
we're
as you
good.
like.
Let's go this side. I'm sorry.
Good afternoon, Dr.
How you
West.
doing, my dear sister?
I'm well. How are you? You spoke briefly earlier about the current and historical plight of Haiti. Can you share what you believe it would take for Haiti to return to a space and capacity of greatness, being the first self-liberated Black nation of this world? Thank you.
Absolutely. Ooh, that's such a crucial question because, see, the Haitian Revolution was one of the most foundational events in the modern world. There's no doubt about that. Its relation to the French Revolution, the bankruptcy French Revolution, the American Revolution just prior, the Americans siding with the wrong side immediately. All the revolutionary talk about overthrowing empires, sounding brass and tinkling cymbal. Empty when it comes to Black people. Take your words and keep it on paper. Because when it comes to your actions, you don't come through when it comes to Black folk. That's what we saw, the Haitian Revolution. And they paid the cost. They paid the cost. They reminded us that Black love is a crime in a white supremacist civilization. Fall in love with Black people, you're going to be criminalized, assassinated, incarcerated, misunderstood, misconstrued. So what? You still got a smile on your face because there's joy in that struggle. And what was the cost they had to pay? They paid reparations to France. I mean, we won't go into all the detail. You see how sick that is.
And they paid reparations until the 20th century?
The 20th century.
20th century they were paying France.
The 20th century. It's like the reparations that were paid to the slaveholders in Washington, D.C. when the slaves were emancipated. You're going to pay money to the slaveholders? How sick is that? That's the sign of a pathological culture, you see. Haiti had the same price to pay, you see. And then you have the internal dynamics of countries, including Haiti, where you end up with thugs like Baby Doc and the others, tied to the empires, crushing their own people in the name of what? Blackness. Oh, better be careful how you talk about blackness. You see, blackness can open and liberate. It can blind and suffocate. You see, same is true with whiteness. John Brown was a white brother, wasn't he? He loved black people more than many black people love themselves. Are you willing to die for black folk? Well, maybe for my mama on Wednesday, but and that's before prayer meeting. I don't know on the rest of the week. Oh, John Brown was ready to die any day. So whiteness is not reducible just to white supremacy. We got white brothers and sisters been fighting against white supremacy. It's just that they got tons of cousins who never got that memo. But that doesn't render them invisible. They still there. They still there. Haiti has yet to be fully reckoned with in terms of its implications for the whole modern world. That's why C.L.R. James's great book of 1938, The Black Jacobins, crucial. That's why the work of probably the most important historian writing right now, his name is Gerald Horne. Gerald Horne, and you all teach Gerald Horne. He's serious making these connections between Haiti and New Orleans and jazz and French Empire, British Empire, Louisiana Purchase, and all the complex dynamics of that, you see. So that I think that the important thing for me is just to accent the greatness of the Haitian people in terms of their perseverance in the face of the most atrocious bombardments and attacks on their bodies, on their psyches. They still, with tornadoes and hurricanes and so forth, they still strong at their best. At their worst, gangsters, thugs. That's too funny.
Thank you.
Yes. Good afternoon, Dr.
How
West.
you doing, my brother?
My name is Stanley Jenkins, and on behalf of the Center for the Study of Religion in the City here at Morgan, I'd like to welcome you and hope that you won't be a stranger.
Indeed.
Just very, very quickly, I had a question which you've actually touched on, and I wanted to make sure I was right and not misunderstanding, and it's dealing with the nature of hope. And
Yes.
I think that that's one of the ideas, at least, that separated you from Ta-Nehisi Coates, among many other ideas. But I also know that in terms of Derek Bell, in terms of the permanence of racism, Anthony Penn's notion of getting rid of outcome-driven strategies and so forth, that there have been other critiques of hope. But listening to you today say, quote, to go down swing, even if you don't stand a snowball's chance in hell, no matter what the outcome it seems, one should still fight, and that there's a hope or something in that. So is there a way maybe to reconcile your notion of hope, maybe with even the critics of hope that you critique? And just very quickly, I know now that you're at Union Theological Seminary, and I know that you're a student of King, who wrestled with certain kinds of doctrines of the church and the dogmas. And I noticed that I've never heard you speak about your particular theology and whether you've ever wrestled with the dogmas and tenets of the church. And I'd just like to get your take on that.
You think that's going to be in 2 minutes? Dr. West, work a miracle here for us.
Oh, what a high quality group here at Morgan State University. I mean, I wrote an essay called Hope and Despair, Past and Present. It's the sustained treatment of a conception of hope in the book edited by Brandy Terry and Tommy Shelby called To Shape a New World, The Political Philosophy of Martin Luther King Jr. And you see, I'm a blues-inflicted revolutionary Christian. And what I mean by that is that, I mean, the blues is a narrative of a catastrophe lyrically expressed. Nobody loves me but my mama, and she might be jiving too. That's the king of the blues. That's BB. Right. Strange Fruit. The Jewish brother wrote the lyrics, right? Maripol, the genius singing. Billie Holiday from Baltimore City. So that for me, the cross is the foundational catastrophic lens through which I view the world. And as a Christian, that means that on that Friday, God is dead. We need Nietzsche to dance in Gay Science section 125 about the death of God. Christians already have encountered that. That the forces of the world, of the Roman Empire, had tried to crush that Jesus from Nazareth. And the Saturday is the history that we live in part. And on that Saturday, God is dead. Because He is not here yet. Most churches jump to the Sunday and don't tell you about the Friday too much. You see, they talk about the crown, don't want to say too much about the cross. You see, no, Frankie Beverly says it's joy and pain. You got to be able to work through this cross. You got to be fortified. And then you have some evidences of that Easter Sunday manifest in a grace that has transformed you in such a way that you're going to be a force for good no matter how busy the devil is. Now, that's not optimism. It's not pessimism. It's something else. It's not just regular hope. Because hope is a verb as well as a virtue. Brother Curtis said, keep on pushing. You got to be in motion. I think that's soul to soul. Keep on moving. And as long as you're in motion, in momentum, with critical consciousness, with a compassionate soul, attending to the best of these, then you are being true to your calling. Because no person going to save the world or take the world to Easter. That's already been done. You got to gain access to powers that allow you to keep going. So in the face of my Afro-pessimist brothers and sisters, I tell them, I'll say, if we like cattle and we're going to be slaughtered and so forth, then I'm going to be a different kind of cattle. Chicken. You know what I mean? Or I might do a rope-a-dope like Muhammad Ali against Foreman. Where they think they hit me, just keep at it for a while and watch me come back and go against your noggin. You see, there has to be different strategies and tactics for the way we fight. Sometimes the only way you can fight is take care of your grandmama so her memories provide such deep sources of power that give you a joy that can never be crushed by the white supremacist powers that be. That's called precious memories. Listen to James Cleveland and Aretha singing in Amazing Grace. Oh, that buoying up of the soul. You don't really have a chance based on the evidence. Since when has the evidence actually determined who we are as human beings? We choose to be souls and spirits who come together to fight. That to me is concretized, fleshified, funkified hope. That's black hope at its best. That's black hope at its best. And the irony is that our foremothers and forefathers in Jim Crow and enslaved circumstances were able to hone out deeper conceptions of hope than many of us in less oppressive circumstances. Because we become drunk with the wine of the world. Isn't that the line in the Negro National Anthem? We become obsessed with the felicities of bourgeois existence. We are obsessed with status and spectacle and image. Can you imagine great-great-grandmama obsessed with status such that she didn't gain access to it? She's given up. She ain't going to love her child. She ain't going to sustain the church. She going to give up on the deacon board and the deaconess board. They got to do what they can do. That's who we are as a people. And we lose that. You can give every Negro successful so-and-so a mansion, and they still enslaved. They still incarcerated in their spirits and in their minds, you see. So we have to keep that tradition going. That's a great tradition, though, y'all. It really, y'all know what I'm talking about. It's a great tradition. Thank God you're born black like that. Ooh, not to put anybody else down, but to say, oh Lord, where does this love and this power and this joy come from? All of this style come from? Ooh, what a people. Then you say, but we got our gangsters and thugs too. And we love them through too. Why? Because like Malcolm X, he was a gangster. The Honorable Muhammad loved him to death. And he became one of the greatest freedom fighters and ended up with a critique of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And so every black person you think's a gangster got a whole lot of Malcolm in them if they can get it out, no matter what gender they are. Because that's true for us in that way, you see. So that's the beginnings of a talk about hope, though, but that's a profound question I can't do justice to. I tell you, absolutely, absolutely.
Let's take one more over here.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Dr. Cornel.
How you doing,
My
my
name
dear
is
sister?
Demaya Milton. I am a freshman here at Morgan State. And
A
I am
freshman? Let's give it up to a freshman now. Freshmen are very special, very special.
I am a political science major, and my question is to you, what advice would you give to Black scholars who will soon have to work in professional white spaces?
Oh, appreciate that you be true to yourself. Always be open to learn and listen, but recognize that you never look at yourself solely through their eyes. The worst thing Black folk could ever do is to be so obsessed with white fears, insecurities, and anxieties that all they think are they're just objects to be seen through those lenses, rather than the lens that we've been talking about today, which is a Black love, Black joy, Black struggle, Black suffering, Black shuddering, Black creativity, and so forth. And it's not great just because it's Black. It's not a question of skin pigmentation. It's a question of the spiritual formation again. Courage is not something that Black folk just have automatically. You got to work at it. But when you work at it and then have come to terms with the scars and wounds of white supremacy, you're going to sound like Al Green. And that's a little different than Pat Boone, you know what I mean? Oh, yeah, you're going to sound like Mary Lou Williams, a little different than Lawrence Welk and Guy Lombardo. Oh, yeah, you're going to have some oomph in it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think now Dr. Will,
I think we got one more.
Okay, sorry.
We got the brother with his brim on looking sharp. Looking sharp, man.
Hello, cousin Cornel.
My fellow cousin.
I am Zeke Botokuma,
Yes,
born in Congo,
yes.
and we Congolese and Africans, we call other Africans brothers,
Yeah.
those who are here. And we call African Americans cousins. That's why I called you cousin.
That's an honor, my brother. That's an honor.
And since I became a US citizen not a long time ago, now I am a brother. Because I'm an American now.
You, my brother. Definitely my brother.
Thank you so much for bringing philosophy from classrooms to other rooms, including to Morgan State University. Because COVID-19 has done a lot of damage to most of us,
Yeah.
and some of us are in search of inspiration. And I think your talk here was inspirational, and I thank you for that. I'm sure you agree with me for that.
No, thank you so much, my brother.
Not long time ago, during the last decade of 20th century, you wrote a book titled Race Matters. You remember?
Oh, yeah. No.
That's your stuff there.
Yeah.
The book was not controversial. And then some years later, there was a movement, there has been a movement called Black Lives Matter. And this has been like a controversial kind of thing. So I was wondering what your vocation and commitment to telling the truth has to tell us about the controversy around Black Lives Matter and the assault on democracy and the assault of critical race thinking.
Yes, we appreciate
Last
that.
thing,
Wayne.
I got your book. I did not really read it, and I brought it here, so I will have you sign, autograph, and that will be my permission, my license and certificate to start with.
Oh, it's a blessing, my brother. It's a blessing. I'm just gonna put love Cornel since we don't. Absolutely. Thank you, my brother. To brother Z-E. K-E-H. Definitely. No, anytime Black people straighten their backs up and struggle for decency and dignity, for me, that's beauty. That's beauty, and that's what we saw. But at the same time, you see, you got these police out of control. And they've been out of control for a long time. And we've got a number of comrades from other communities that march with us as well. But the important thing you got to tell young folk, Harriet Tubman believed Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter go all the way back 400 years. And of course, we haven't got into the African civilizations and empires and so forth, where they didn't have to deal so directly with white supremacy. And they had great achievements as well as their own forms of oppression simultaneously. But the challenge of every generation, and I want to end with this, are the four questions that the great W.B. Du Bois raised. How shall integrity face oppression? Every movement. Morgan State University, 1947, Black Lives Matter, 2021. What does decency do in the face of insult? What does honesty do in the face of lies and deception? And how does courage meet brute force? Every generation, every person has to raise the question. I got one life to live. How will I live a life of integrity, honesty, decency, and courage, rooted in a deep love and compassion? And everybody has to answer that question within your own heart and within the movements that you join, you see. And it's perennial, it's endless, because all of us fall short. All of us fall short, you see. But I think that anytime we live in a moment where, you know, the neo-fascists in this country and in various parts around the world are escalating with Trump and company. And white supremacy is its public face, but behind it is big military. Congress just voted $780 billion for military, massive increase. And look what happens when they debate infrastructure. Look what happens when they debate education. Look what happens when they debate childcare. They're willing to cut that. They won't touch the military budget. 53 cents for every dollar go to the military. So you got 47 cents left for all the other things. That's what Martin King was talking about when he said the bombs dropped in Vietnam land in West Baltimore, because you don't have resources. Those are very, very important questions when it comes to Black Lives Matter and making sure, just like Obama, myself, all of us have to be accountable to something bigger than us. And the price that has been paid for us to even be here. And then the remembrance, the reverence, the debt that we pay by trying to pass it on to the younger generation. And for 154 years, that's this grand institution. That's a long time in white supremacist America. 154 years, and stronger than ever. Morgan State University is stronger than ever. It's like, good God Almighty. Somebody been praying for this institution, supporting this institution, sacrificing for this institution. And when I got the call from my dear brother President David Wilson, when he said it'd be wonderful if we'd be able to work together. We had marvelous time at Rutgers. When was that? About almost 15 years ago, something like that. It was. And I said, anything I can do, because Morgan gave a honorary degree to E. Franklin Frazier in 1955 at a time in which no one would hardly touch him with a 10-foot pole because he'd written a book called The Black Bourgeoisie. And it was an indictment of the black middle class that was so obsessed with its status that it wasn't using its status to be of service to the least of these. That's E. Franklin Frazier. He got pushed out everywhere he went, even his own home institution. I love Howard, but gotta tell the truth. The condition of truth to allow suffering to speak. Even Howard University, pushing the brother aside. He grew up in Baltimore and he was pugnacious, but he's a genius too. So he can be hard to get along with, on the street and in the gym. But in terms of his ideas, he's powerful. Morgan State said, you will receive an honorary degree. And who was the president then?
Dr. Jenkins.
Was that Brother President Jenkins?
Yes.
And I mean, I was only 2 years old, but I would have been given a standing ovation.
Yes.
I wasn't born yet.
You weren't even born yet.
I was in the womb.
You were in the womb. You're on the way. You're on the way. But what I'm saying is, though, it took courage for them to allow that kind of critic to be elevated in that way. And it's precisely those kind of voices that need to be wrestled with, not because those voices have a monopoly on truth. No one of us have a monopoly on truth, but voices have insights. E. Franklin Frazier had some very powerful insights of the ways in which the black middle class would become drunk with the wine of the world and no longer keep the bread of life fresh. And if you don't keep the bread of life fresh, all of the things of the world become empty. What does it profit a person? What does it profit an institution to gain the whole world? Lose its soul. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. That's powerful stuff. But thank you all so much.
Thank you very much.
Morgan State University, let's give it up for Brother Dr. Cornel West.
Oh, Lord.
There's only one Brother Dr. Cornel West in this country, and we're delighted to have him here. Brother West, the one thing that you don't do is try and summarize anything after you have spoken. And I won't do that except to say thank you very much for talking with us about the task of Black intellectuals in our time, vocation, tradition, and a revolutionary spirit. And so we have just a couple of Morgan State University mementos here to pass on to you. And so we know that as you have gone from institution to institution at the highest order of American higher education, that you have amassed everything, but we want you to find some place at Union to display this, to let them know that Morgan State University values Brother Dr. Cornel West in the same way that we valued E. Franklin Frazier. And then last, I'm going to issue a challenge to you that I know I'm going to lose, right? Because that's your signature in terms of how you are dressed today. I've never seen you in a public space without this signature dress on. But you also are regular, as you indicated, on the Charles Blow show, and I know in the Roland Martin show. And so my challenge is that when you get on those shows again, that I want you to adorn, if you will, a sweatshirt saying, I just a few weeks ago went to the best university on the universe. Our national treasure, Morgan State University. And so, Morgan family, please join me once again in giving it up in the vernacular to Brother Dr. Cornel West. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And the members of our university basketball team are here with Coach Broders, and they would like to come around quickly, Brother West, and take a photo with you. And Brother West would do the same thing for others who also want to do it as well. And thank you very much to Professor E.R. Shipp for just doing an extraordinary job of moderating this discussion as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Is it just to hold this like this? Is this all right? Yes, and I'm gonna hold this up like this.
I'm good. Good to see you.